Aljamain Sterling defends the Bantamweight title against Henry Cejudo. Cejudo's first fight in 3 years, his last being a Bantamweight title fight where he defeated Dominic Cruz in Jacksonville, Florida, in the first kind of official COVID event. I know they had the one in Brazil, but that was the real first one, where he vanquished the greatest bantamweight of all time, and then retired, citing money, which has not been in the promotion of this matchup. That's why Cejudo left. Demetrius Johnson was being interviewed about this, and he said that, speaking to Henry, he was tired. He just had enough, and he just couldn't keep going on this run, and he wanted time off. Fair enough. Tom, let me ask you this question. Cejudo's coming back at 36 to face Aljamain Sterling. Why this matchup? Why has he come back for this one?
I think that's an interesting question, because Aljamain has been somehow, one way or another, sat astride the division for a few fights now. Perhaps Henry might have thought the whole bantamweight picture might shake out a little differently, but nonetheless, here we are. I'm not sure it's a question of who the opponent is, but rather where Henry's at. And what I mean by that is I think he wants that challenge again. He said as much in his pre-fight interviews. He's hinted at a lingering desire to move up to a further division, to go up to 145 and fight Volkanovski. Surely a step too far, but this win could be the platform for him to really cement himself as one of the greats.
Yeah, it's interesting because that gives you an insight to how he views the sport. Now, I think me and you are similar. We love the guys that stand at the top of the mountain and face the onrushing horde of contenders. You know, that's why we hold Kamaru Usman up as like near enough one of the greatest of all time. Israel Adesanya, like of the current crop of guys that can get up there. GSP, Anderson Silva, John Jones. Henry Cejudo is not of that make. Henry Cejudo is almost in a classic pro wrestling sense of belt collecting. Like, what's the next belt I can get? And it made me realise that actually that's his thought process, because that was the process he was in for such a long time of the Olympic wrestling is like the medal. That's it. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter how. That's all that counts. That's all that matters, is that you have the belt. You have the medal. Whereas for us, it's you have the belt and you mashed everyone else into the ground.
And the style in which you did it.
And and of course the style that you do it. That's massively important as well. But anyway, Tom, what do you think I'm fair in my assessment there?
No, I think you have to say you are. I mean, the man won the flyweight division and proceeded to abandon the division as fast as possible.
I mean, he defended the title once against Dillashaw.
Yeah, I mean, okay, but that was another belt in itself, you know?
Yes.
Dillashaw I mean, he was one of the greats at Bantamweight.
Yes, for sure.
And it was supposed to be him kind of crowning his legacy by going down to flyweight, ill-advised though it seemed to many. And I think that's a notch on the belt.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that. Carl McLaughlin of the Combat Chronicles podcast, he said that when Cejudo beat Dillashaw, he thought of Cejudo as the bantamweight champion then. Like, in the boxing sense, because that's what happens in boxing.
Well, Joe, we can't ignore the fact that Cejudo, much like our current champ, Sterling, did win the belt in some dubious circumstances.
What, because he didn't fight Dillashaw because Dillashaw ruined his career by going to flyweight and using EPO to get there?
Well, actually, sorry, I'm referring to his flyweight conquest.
Oh, sorry, yes, when he beat Demetrius Johnson.
When he did not beat Demetrius Johnson, but the fight was called in his favour nonetheless.
Yes.
So I think, that he, although he would never acknowledge it publicly, he knows at least it was a very close fight.
Of course.
To have the chance to put his mark on the division, a defence against a big name like Dillashaw, irresistible. Promptly moves up to bantamweight, and his stay there is not long either, Joe.
No. Defeats Marlon Moraes. And then doesn't defend the title again until May 2020 when he faces Dominic Cruz. And then that's it. Rides off into the sunset.
And again, you see the same theme. Perhaps the greatest bantamweight of all time. Certainly people would have said that at the time, and I think you'd still have to argue that is the case.
I would say Dominic Cruz is still the greatest bantamweight of all time. His CV, I think, is the strongest as bantamweight champion.
For now.
For sure.
And there we are. Cejudo retires. I was very disappointed at the time. I'd spent a lot of time doubting Henry Cejudo, and I was just coming around to okay, this guy's actually, he's pretty special.
Yeah,
he's pretty good.
Yeah. This Henry Cejudo, he's a good fighter.
Yeah,
mad take to have.
Well, I didn't want to acknowledge it.
No, neither did I. Me and you were desperate for Cruz to win that fight, weren't we?
So yeah, it was disappointing. I mean, he said again in pre-fight interviews, it was that competition non-stop from 11 to 32, but it always seemed like a faux retirement. We never really believed it. We always thought he was coming back.
Yeah.
And I guess it is surprising that Aljamain is the man he comes back to. But as you say, Joe, 36 years old, now is the time. This is when his body still hopefully has something left in the tank. And it's Aljamain who sat astride the division. I know you're not a big fan of what he's done as the champion.
Well, it's hard to be, isn't it? It's hard to be. I think part of it is the fact that we have missed out on, I think, Henry Cejudo's probably best years. You know, the fact is he was 33 when he won the title, 32, 33 years old. You know, and that would have been and he was just absolutely on fire in that Dominic Cruz fight. And then he leaves and we get an absolute mess of the division. You know, Petr Yan fighting Jose Aldo off a loss to win the title. And then loses it to Sterling in that weird DQ manner. Sterling then pulls out with injury, but we get Yan versus Sandhagen for the interim title. One of the best fights of all time. And then Sterling defeats Yan to unify and retain in a somewhat contentious decision victory, in which, you know, he took the back in rounds 2 and 3, and in hopes that he'd won round 1. And then he defeats a one-armed TJ Dillashaw. Now, this is the thing, is that Aljamain Sterling will say, well, I just beat who was in front of me.
I got to interject.
Go on.
I have to raise an exception. I think you're a little bit too dismissive of what he pulled off in the second fight with Yan.
Oh,
and let me tell you why.
Sorry, yes.
Let me tell you why.
That made it sound bad, but I do give him a lot of respect for that win.
I think we have to. Nobody gave him a chance in that fight, and that was based off the first fight where he came out too fast and he got beaten fodder.
Up. He was being mashed into the ground.
It was a bad look. Nobody really saw the adjustments he could make. Nobody saw a path to victory. That path, Joe, was the backpack, locking it in, and exploiting Petr Yan showing his back when he was scrambling to get up.
That's true.
And he did what he had to do, Joe. He took that position very quickly, very efficiently, and is one of the best in the game to do it.
Let me just also suggest, though, that Petr Yan's corner was not able to get into the country, which was maybe part of another problem for Yan in that fight. This is the thing, is that, you know, Aljamain Sterling's title defences and even title wins, they've got asterisks next to them. You know, and so when you look at the names, you're like, wow, this guy beat Petr Yan twice. He beat TJ Dillashaw.
They have got the audacity in the pre-fight montage to show Dillashaw getting pounded into the mat.
Bro, they got to milk it. They got to try and get what they can out of that fight. Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know, Dillashaw had one arm.
Yes.
He was injured going into the fight.
And it popped out in the fight.
A travesty.
It was mental that he did that. Mental. Anyway, Tom, you made a good point there. We've talked about the narrative of this fight.
And that other name there, which we brushed over, we talked about Petr Yan and Cody Sandhagen have an all-time belter. Aljamain Sterling vanquished Cody Sandhagen in no time at all, in 1 minute, 30 seconds, I believe it was.
Yes.
Took his back, choked him out, closed the show.
Yeah.
So he is of that caliber.
Oh, for sure.
He has Pedro Munoz on his record. He has Jimmy Rivera. back when that meant something.
Oh, very much so. I think Rivera had only lost to a Sun Tzu, had he? Or no, Marlon Moraes even. Like, that was it. And then
that
he
name
had the
also
Sterling
meant
loss.
something at some time. So
Yes, of course.
here we are, Joe. I think we should get into it. How's this fight going to play out? What should we look for?
It's interesting, this, because I actually really think this depends on what Cejudo's going to do. So if Cejudo presses into Sterling, as in takes the centre of the cage and moves forward, Cejudo's had that karate stance, you know what I mean? And he almost literally has the palms out, sort of karate style, heavy on the lead leg, pressing into Sterling. We're going to see Sterling doing his thing, which is lateral side-to-side movement along the cage, switching stances as he does that as he moves, pivoting into different stances, and then throwing wild, funky shots. High kick if he's going to his right, in southpaw, high kick from the right leg, and if he's going to his left, in southpaw, high kick to the head from the rear leg, or body kick from there. We'll see that a lot. Lots of interesting little spinning elbows as well he'll throw in there. I mean, let's just be honest, like, if we're looking at his striking in a technical style, he ain't going to make it far in Thailand. Do you know what I mean? Like, his striking is not of that standard.
He's not Bangkok ready.
No, he's not Bangkok ready at all. He is not Bangkok ready in the slightest. But it is incredibly effective for what he wants, which is he kind of basically wants to get hands on you to either disrupt your rhythm so that he can then shoot in for a takedown, which for the most part in his recent fights, he's not been that successful with takedowns. His takedowns haven't been very good. I want to get into a takedown so then I can get my chest to chest to you, get into your body, get an underhook, get you turning, make you have to get into an overhook, get you moving into positions so that if I can even get a hint of the back, a hint of that back, he's leaping on it. Like, any sniff of the back, he's going to try and leap at it. And it's like, there's a great one where, in the Petr Yan fight, this is another thing, by the way, court kicks. Kicks to the body, Aljamain Sterling is so good at catching them. And if you go low, he'll even reach down for one of those, which might open up for something for Cejudo. But he is very good at catching kicks. Yes, sorry, Tom.
Yeah, Joe. That's a lot to look into there, but we did notice some similar themes, and we're more talking there about weaknesses you might have in Cejudo, in that, as you say, Sterling has got a lot of takedowns off of catching kicks, and Cejudo's going to want to rip that kick in there. He's going to want to work that. That's become one of his weapons since he's adopted this more kind of refined karate style, where he can also blitz in, but he's largely like controlling the distance very well. Yeah. He does obviously use kicks to control that distance. Something Henry needs with his miserly reach. Well, which let me just highlight to you, Joe. The reach disadvantage here: 64-inch reach for Henry Cejudo versus a 71-inch reach for Aljamain. So Cejudo's going to be wanting to make up for that by controlling distance with kicks.
Yeah,
could be a risk. Could open up some opportunities for Sterling.
Are you thinking just low kicks for Henry? Like, do you think he's going to do that sort of? Because he does that thing of, like, he pumps the hands to then move forward into the kicks, like he did against Cruz, where he just swiping across. Like, I'm going to go.
It's a blitz.
Yeah, the blitzing sort of low kick to take away your movement, because that's what he did to Cruz, which was work the body and the legs, took away Cruz's movement, and then sort of read his resets to sort of set up that knee. The thing is with Sterling is that, like, Sterling is, like, probably physically the biggest guy Cejudo's faced. Like, even Cruz is bigger than Cejudo, but, like, he's not like as big as Aljamain Sterling. Sterling is going to be moving up to featherweight at some stage in his career.
Is there a bigger bantamweight than Sterling in the top 15? Who comes to mind?
You mean mass?
Yeah, physicality.
Height?
No, I'm talking about the whole package, Joe.
I think Ricky Simone with his back, but the Sandhagen in terms of height, O'Malley in terms of height, but physicality, I think Sterling is pretty much one of one, isn't he?
Yeah, I got to imagine he's having some of the hardest weight cuts there can be to make it to 135.
I think he cuts from 160 something. I mean, it's a lot, man. He's cutting a lot.
It's a lot, and we know that Cejudo was quite at home at flyweight. Now, of course, the man has bulked up significantly. You can see that.
Yes.
I wouldn't say he's Daniel Cormier at heavyweight.
No.
He's got a big frame on him.
Yeah.
That doesn't make up for the reach.
No.
And the height.
No.
And Henry's always going to be fighting at that disadvantage, but it's going to be most pronounced here.
Yeah. The thing that I never really want to write Cejudo off now, because like rewatching his fights, he's such a great game planner, and also he's great at adjusting mid-fight. Like you talk about that karate stance, and me and you, I remember we watched the Moraes fight together, and like Moraes was beating him up, and then Cejudo's like, you know what, I can't do this. So he pressed into him, got that tie clinch, the plum clinch, and then just ripped him with knees to the body, and just like crushed him with knees, crushed him with elbows, and it was like he just made it like a brawl, pushing into him, making Moraes have to work and go backwards, fighting at his pace. I think Cejudo was really good at adjusting mid-fight.
You're citing that as an example of him adjusting mid-fight.
Yeah, I think the Demetrius Johnson fight as well, there was some really good mid-fight adjustments he did, particularly in the grappling exchanges.
Well, just back on the Moraes fight, I feel like that fight might be misunderstood. I really do think it was part of Henry's plan to go and eat those shots, to eat Moraes' best punches.
What, because Moraes' muscle mass is built in such a way that he's going to tire out?
And that's exactly what we saw. I've never seen a steeper decline from 2 rounds away from being the champ.
Yeah, minutes even away. Like, could he have gotten him out of there?
Moraes looked amazing in that first round.
Yeah.
But once that first round was over, as you said, Henry adapted, but that was also because Moraes was just so diminished. He'd really punched himself out. And I have to give Henry credit. Henry and perhaps a certain man, Eric Albarracin.
Yes. And his mystical book.
The doctor of philosophy himself. I think they saw Moraes coming. And I think they'll see Aljamain Sterling coming here too. What will Henry be looking to do to Aljamain?
Well, this is the thing that people have talked about Aljamain, where they go like, well, he works with Merab, and he's been fighting, he's able to go the distance and whatnot. It's like, yeah, but if you watch those Petr Yan fights, even the second one, there's no contest. Rounds 4 and 5 are Petr Yan rounds. Well, I'm thinking he could get Aljamain out of there. He could get him out of there. Aljamain Sterling does slightly fall off as the fights go on, and I do sometimes think he is carrying way too much mass for that division. Particularly 135, man, that's a hard cut to get to for a man of his size. And I do wonder if that cardio is there. But the thing is that even in those rounds he was losing Etienne, he was still active, he was still causing exchanges, he was still trying to press and lead the exchanges. So he is still in there. It's just that obviously Petr Yan is a later rounds fighter anyway. So maybe that sort of stylistic matchup lines up there. The problem is though, we're also having to make predictions off of a man who's not fought in 3 years. That's the other issue. What is this Cejudo going to look like? Now, according to Aljamain Sterling, he thinks he's on the juice, which, Aljamain, now, you've made this claim a couple times against your opponents. Something about stones and glass houses seems to be coming to mind now, particularly with your teammate, Mr. Dvashvili, who, I've got to say, his blood is mostly EPO, so do not be giving me that nonsense. I don't know, man. It's hard. It's hard for me to predict. Like, I've struggled with this fight for about a week or two now to really think about what it's going to go like.
If you knew you were going to get the Henry Cejudo who left the division 3 years ago as champ, would that make it much easier for you?
Like what? He's transported from that Dominic Cruz fight into this one. Aljamain at this point.
Yeah.
It'd be easier in some aspects, yeah. It would be. But I just don't know, man. Like, I don't know. Because I know some people go about like, well, Cejudo's got good striking. He knocks people down. Obviously his wrestling is so much better. But like, this is MMA. And Sterling's even said this. This is MMA wrestling. Like, yeah, you could...
It's a different sport.
It's not the same thing. My grappling. Like, when I get to the back, that's not wrestling anymore. That's grappling. Can he get to the back, though? Because Cejudo's scrambling is superb. Like, you watch the second Demetrius Johnson fight, there's this one trip he gets where like he kept getting like this inside trip where there was one where he went for a takedown. DJ blocks it, and Cejudo's on his knees coming back up, and then gets the trip from there. And it was so good. Daniel Cormier popped on commentary where he's just like, oh my god, like when he sees some super slick wrestling, that's when Cormier pops. And I just it's just so hard for me to picture. That's the problem with this fight. Because if we were getting O'Malley versus Sterling, we would have a clearer idea of what we were going to get. So that's just there's this glue that's missing for me. And also I think Cejudo's very interesting with the training footage he puts out, because he doesn't put out training footage really. He puts out a bit like, oh, he's me warming up, and then here's me after my training. It's like, oh, okay. Whereas Sterling puts out everything. Like, you can see what he's training, but we kind of know what he's going to do anyway. And Cejudo must be eating that stuff up as well. So I don't know. There's some interesting power dynamics going on outside the cage as well. So I don't know. Tom, is there anything else you wanted to chat about in terms of the specifics or the narratives, or do you want to just go straight into our predictions?
I want to go into our predictions, Joe. I know how this fight is going to go.
Tell me.
Henry Cejudo is back. He will be the champion again after this fight, winning by decision. You mentioned it earlier, the later rounds. I expect him to give up the first round to Sterling. I think that's undoubtable. I think Sterling will come in with high emotion. I think it will be very similar to that first Petr Yan fight, where he goes out and he tries to put a pressure marker on Cejudo. And then I expect Cejudo to come onto him strong later rounds and win by decision.
Wow. Interesting. So the statistic that really interested me was that fighters over the age of 36 in title fights from 170 down to 125 have a record of 2 wins in 38 fights.
Oh my god.
And those 2 wins are Tyron Woodley defending his welterweight title against Damian Maia and Darren Till.
The same Tyron Woodley that just got bested by Jake Paul.
Yes, that Woodley himself. And man, Bantamweight, this is a rough division, man. That's a rough division. And we talk about the age of Cejudo. We talked about it before, he's 36, he's coming back now, this is the time to do it. And is it him going this is the time to do it because Aljamain is the right opponent for me to come back? Or is it, I'm coming back now because this is the only time I can come back. I can't come back in 6 months or a year later into this division because it's just not going to work for me. And it's wow, where is his mind at? And then I look at all these elements, I look at all these different things, and I just have to give it to him. I really have to give it to Aljamain Sterling here. He's been overlooked so often. And I just can't look past, just the sheer physicality of this man. And that is why I've gone for an Aljamain Sterling decision win over Henry Cejudo. And to be honest, there's even a part of me that thinks he might even finish him. I think the strength and power of Sterling might be a bit too much for Cejudo. And it's these guys can come back, but we see John Jones come back and beast Cyril Gane, and then we realise, Cyril Gane's not that good, But the thing is that Aljamain Sterling is that good. He is of that upper class, and I struggle to see how Cejudo. I don't know. I've got this image in my head of a 36-year-old Henry Cejudo losing this fight and just going yeah, well, I came back. I'll see you later. Off I go.
I think that really underplays the competitor that he is.
Oh,
I don't think he would come back unless he knew that he was in the shape to do it. I just don't. I don't see that.
I think he's come back because he thinks Aljamain's beatable as the champ. That's what he thinks.
I don't think he's cherry picked Aljamain either, Joe.
Do you not?
I really don't.
Then why didn't he come back for Petr Yan then? Petr Yan would have been easier then by that rationale. Or was he not ready to come back yet, do you think?
I don't think Petr Yan would be an easier matchup for Henry Cejudo.
Really? So what do you think?
Yeah.
All right, out of the top 5, who do you think is the easiest fight for him? or the top, whatever you want to choose?
I'm thinking it's Sean O'Malley.
I think O'Malley would beat him.
Keeps him at range.
I think he might finish him.
Clips him coming in.
Oh yeah, I think his striking is. Thing is, like, O'Malley's got dim mak, touch of death, power.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It's a fascinating fight, and like yesterday I was like, I think Cejudo's going to do it, and I was just like, man, I don't know. Like, I've shat on Sterling multiple times on this podcast, and I think, you know what? Now I've got to give him. I'm going to do it. I'm going to back him. And I'm going to see if he can do it. If Cejudo can do it, I would not be surprised in the slightest. But it was quite literally a 50-50 coin flip for me. But you were quite certain on Cejudo.
And the odds makers too.
I thought it was quite even, though. I thought Cejudo's
the favourite. No, evens.
Jesus.
Evens. I just look at what Cejudo's been able to achieve and the tools that he has, and I think they eclipse Sterling. I really do. I don't see Sterling besting Cejudo in a stand-up matchup. I don't see Sterling being able to work many takedowns. I don't see, for example, Henry kicking to the body often enough to offer that as a possible way for Sterling to take it to the mat, where I do think Sterling would be a big threat. And I also don't see Sterling ducking in for a single leg without eating a knee. I really see it as quite limited for Sterling if we're getting the Cejudo that I remember.
That's interesting.
And I remember him. It's in hindsight. I recognise him from looking back from now.
Yeah,
with rose tinted glasses, and with the full passage of time that's gone on, and I say, well, he has done some great things in there.
Yeah, I think if he beats Sterling, like, I wouldn't put him as one of the all-time greats, just because simply of my preference of what I want from that level of competitor. But my word, to come back at this age to do it, that's remarkable. It is remarkable.